The network behind King the Land drama just had its assets frozen by a bankruptcy court. And did you know that on one hit K-drama, the lead made $149,000 per episode, while the lowest paid actor on the same set made $74, and an actor from The Glory was still working part-time jobs after the drama aired because he got barely paid. K-dramas look bigger than ever, so why is the industry behind them running out of money, and who will suffer from the consequences? Let's start with JTBC, the channel behind King the Land, Reborn Rich, Sky Castle, The World of the Married. On June 12, 2026, JTBC failed to repay a $20.6 billion loan on time, roughly $13.5 million, and went into default. 3 days later, the Seoul bankruptcy court froze its assets. This is not some tiny studio or a startup app we're talking about. This is one of the pillars of Korean television, and it was standing in bankruptcy court. What made it worse was that inside the industry, almost nobody was surprised. This collapse didn't begin in the summer of 2026. It began years earlier, at the very bottom of the payroll, with an actor who earned $74 for an episode of a hit drama. That paycheck is where the whole story starts. From the outside, 2023 looked like another victory lap for K-dramas. Headlines almost every day. A new hit, skyrocketing ratings, another season greenlit, another record broken overseas. With the monthly must-watch lists never running dry, it was easy to believe the supply of dramas was endless. If you weren't a super fan, you'd have had no reason to think anything was wrong. Then, two organizations most international fans have never heard of went public, and what they revealed disgusted the entire country. South Korea has two main bodies that speak for actors, the Korea Broadcasting Actors Union and the Korea Broadcasting Performers' Rights Association. Union membership isn't nearly as common there as it is in Hollywood, which is part of why the industry's ugliest secrets stayed buried for so long. In 2023, the unions put the pay data on the table for everyone to see. According to their findings, most Korean actors earn so little that they can't cover the basic costs of a decent life. The stars who bag lead roles year after year are fine. The problem sits with the supporting actors and minor characters who fill every scene around them. The unions compared salaries across 9 popular dramas that aired between 2021 and 2023, shows you've almost certainly watched, like Snowdrop, Forecasting Love and Weather, Startup, and Hometown Cha-Cha-Cha. The widest gap came from the revenge thriller Payback. The lead actor was paid around $200 million per episode, which was about $149,000 at the time. Across a 12-episode run, that comes to nearly $1.8 million. The lowest paid actor on the same drama earned $74 per episode. Not $74,000, $74. The star was earning roughly 2,000 times more than a colleague standing on the same set every day. It's hard to imagine anyone agreeing to work for that. And the unions showed exactly how companies got away with it for so long. The contracts handed to smaller actors were, to put it politely, unconventional. Nobody is arguing that leads shouldn't earn more, but the way these contracts are written turns earning less into something closer to inhumane. Main actors are paid per episode, and for them that makes sense because they control their schedules. Supporting actors sign the same per-episode structure with none of the control. They have no idea whether an episode will take a day, a week, or a month to shoot. That uncertainty locks them out of booking any other acting work while they wait. And it doesn't matter how long the shoot drags on. 2 weeks or 2 months on set, the paycheck stays exactly the same. So run the math. If an episode takes 5 days to film, that $74 actor just earned about $15 a day on a show pulling in millions of viewers. And sometimes even that money never comes. Park Sang-ju of the Korea Drama Production Association admitted that some actors are only paid after a drama airs, and that the broadcaster doesn't actually take responsibility for the project. In his words, sometimes situations occur where actors are not paid for their time. Imagine spending 2 months on set, watching your show climb the charts, and still waiting on a paycheck that may never arrive. When these findings went public, South Korea's Culture, Sports, and Tourism Committee fired back with unusually strong language, warning that conditions like these threaten the survival of the very people who make the dramas we love. For an institution that usually speaks in careful bureaucratic language, that's about as close to an alarm bell as it gets. At this point, the story looks simple. Greedy production companies exploiting powerless actors, case closed. But when the studios finally responded, they opened their own books, and the numbers inside flipped the villain of this story upside down. The studio's side of the ledger tells a different story. In the early 2000s, star salaries took up about 10% of a drama's budget. Today, paying the leads can swallow half of it, and in some cases more. The asking prices climbed year after year, with some top actors now demanding up to 1 billion won per episode. By January 2024, things were bad enough that the Korea Drama Production Association called an emergency meeting to discuss, in their own words, how to avoid the total collapse of the K-drama world. One production company representative called it a vicious cycle. Top actors were asking for enormous fees and attaching conditions on top of them, scheduling adjustments, rewrites to scripts that had already been approved, and in some cases changes to cast and crew, to the point where directors were reportedly replaced just to keep a leading actor happy. For everyone below the line, that means an entire production bending around one person's salary and schedule, while the actor earning $74 an episode waits to be told which week they're allowed to work. The strange thing is that the association didn't deny underpaying supporting actors. It admitted the problem and called for urgent solutions, whether through negotiations with management agencies or policy formulation. In plain language, they were saying they know the system is broken and can't fix it on their own. Then came the number that made every viewer's jaw drop. While Queen of Tears was airing, reports claimed Kim Soo-hyun was earning 800 million won per episode, which would have been almost $10 million for the full run. Viewers were furious. And then the production team shot the number down, calling it wildly inflated. The real fee, according to Korean media, was closer to 300 million won per episode, about $3.7 million in total, and it was actually lower than what he earned on his previous project because he cut his own rate as production costs ballooned. Even that discounted fee came to 5 billion won, roughly an eighth of the drama's entire 40 billion won budget for one actor. When even a star's discount costs that much, the math is broken at the root. Most fans get the next part completely wrong. Almost no actor has that kind of leverage in either direction. Viewers assume every successful actor becomes financially secure, that one-hit drama basically sets them up for life. If you've ever thought that, you couldn't be further from the truth. Even actors from shows that broke records on Netflix aren't always doing well. Remember the actor from the beginning? Yoon Sung-il delivered one of the most talked about performances in The Glory, a show that sat at the top of Netflix charts around the world. His career exploded overnight. He later revealed that he was working ordinary part-time jobs before the show and kept working them after it became an international phenomenon. The settlement he received, he said, was nowhere near what people imagine. There he was, one of the most watched faces on the planet's biggest streaming service, still clocking in somewhere to pay the bills. In this industry, success on screen and money in the bank are two very different things. Meanwhile, the cost of simply making a drama kept climbing. An episode that used to cost around $500,000 to produce can now run as high as $2 million, which means an entire episode's budget from the old days wouldn't even cover a single A-lister's fee today. So who taught Korean television to spend like this? Strangely enough, a show about desperate people killing each other for prize money. Ask anyone inside the industry, and they'll tell you the same thing. Everything changed after Squid Game. K-dramas were already loved worldwide, but Squid Game showed the streaming giants exactly how much profit one Korean story could generate globally. Suddenly, Netflix, Disney+, Apple TV, and Prime Video were all shopping in Seoul, carrying wallets no Korean broadcaster could ever match. The platforms hadn't suddenly discovered Korea. Squid Game simply proved a local story could become the biggest show on the planet's biggest platform. And once that math existed, everyone wanted the next one. There's a piece of plumbing here that most viewers never see. Even when a drama lands on Netflix, Netflix rarely makes it alone. The directors and writers are Korean, the crews are Korean, and roughly 90% of the actual work is done by Korean production companies, while the platform mostly writes checks and collects the global upside. Viewers don't care about any of that. They care whether their favorite actor is in it and whether the plot sounds good. But it means the entire global K-drama boom runs through a handful of local companies operating on razor-thin margins, sitting right next to a foreign partner with effectively unlimited money. The head of one Korean production company put the imbalance bluntly. There is a significant difference in production budgets between us and global OTT platforms like Netflix, and yet, it seems the same standards are being applied to us. The gap is almost comical. For the second season of Squid Game, Lee Jung-jae reportedly earned more than $1 million per episode. That is more than the entire per-episode budget of some Korean productions, and it went to one man. Star fees were only part of the bill. Modern hits demand overseas shoots, elaborate sets, licensing, insurance, bigger crews, global marketing, and mountains of CGI. Think of Moving or Sweet Home. Neither of those shows would exist without Disney Plus and Netflix money. It all adds up to an uncomfortable fact. Even if every Korean actor agreed to work for free tomorrow, the industry would still be drowning in costs. The streaming era rewrote the product itself, too. For decades, dramas ran 16 episodes at 70 or 80 minutes each. Netflix trimmed that to 8, 10, or 12 episodes at 40 to 60 minutes, built for international binge-watching rather than Korean living rooms. Stories now get greenlit to attract the widest possible global audience, which means anything niche, slow, or deeply traditional has almost zero chance of approval. The quiet family sagas and small-town romances, the stories that only fully make sense if you grew up with them, don't clear the bar anymore, no matter how good the script is. And that pressure crushes the smallest players hardest. Some tiny production houses have staff working essentially for free, people who believe in a story and hope it strikes gold, because there's no budget left to actually pay them. Even the giants who built K-drama felt the squeeze. SBS, MBC, and KBS could no longer afford to fully produce their own shows, so they outsourced production to independent companies and third parties. Extraordinary Attorney Woo, one of the most beloved dramas of the decade, was rejected multiple times before a small producer finally took the risk, and the money that carried it to the world came from Netflix again. A study out of Simon Fraser University in Canada found the pattern hiding underneath all of this. There are more genres on our screens than ever before, but the shows are coming from fewer and fewer big-money companies. The middle of the industry is quietly vanishing. Which raises the obvious question, if everyone could see this spending was unsustainable, why didn't anyone stop? Because during the boom, every company in Seoul was hunting its own Squid Game, its own When Life Gives You Tangerines. They bet fortunes on stories that seemed gripping and global. But hits like that are lottery tickets, and the copies almost never paid off. As long as investors believed worldwide demand would keep growing forever, the spending stayed a race to sign the biggest stars and take the biggest swing. It worked right up until the investors changed one word. They stopped asking for growth and started asking for profit. And while the studios were burning money on the way up, the thing that had quietly paid for K-dramas for 50 years was disappearing underneath them. The old business model was beautifully simple. Dramas aired on broadcast TV, ran 16 or even 20 episodes a season, and paid for themselves with advertising and product placement. That's why so many mid-2010s shows were stuffed with suspiciously long shots of sandwiches and instant coffee. The ads were the budget. 20 episodes a season was completely normal back then because broadcast TV was the destination and sponsors were lining up to get their products in the frame. That world is gone. Viewers moved to streaming, to YouTube, and to their phones, and in Asia, microdramas exploded. They're short, so nobody has to sit on a couch for an 80-minute episode. They go straight onto social media, so you can finish one on the way to work. And they're aggressively localized, written almost algorithmically for exactly the person watching, based on the data you leave behind online. Why sit through commercial breaks when something is being built just for you, on your phone? The ad money followed the audience out the door. JTBC's own TV advertising revenue slid from roughly 205 billion won to 185 billion won in just 2 years, which means the broadcasters can't survive on their own channels anymore. They need Netflix's checkbook and Netflix's reach just to stay in the game, and it's the same Netflix that's outbidding them for their own stars. Now stack it all up. Exploding star fees, blockbuster production costs, a dying advertising model, and total dependence on foreign platforms. That is the tower JTBC was standing on. And the final shove, strangely, wasn't a drama at all. Back in 2019, JTBC broke from Korea's long tradition of broadcasters, buying major sports rights together, and went solo, spending a reported fortune on exclusive Olympic and World Cup rights stretching into the early 2030s. The bet soured, and it drained cash at the exact moment there was no cash to spare. Then came June 2026, and everything fell apart in 2 weeks. June 12th, JTBC misses the payment on 20.6 billion won in loans and declares default. June 14th, 4 sister companies in the Jungang Group, including Megabox, the cinema chain, file for court-supervised rehabilitation. June 15th, JTBC files too, and the Seoul Bankruptcy Court freezes the assets of all 5 companies, banning them from selling anything off or quietly paying favored creditors. JTBC even emails its own employees, telling them to stop using their corporate cards. Every single one suspended. And the group's finances turn out to be staggering. A reported debt ratio over 2,400%, an operating loss of about 18.6 billion won in the first quarter alone, and total group borrowings of around 2.8 trillion won, close to $2 billion. Days later, JTBC's brand new drama Rediscovery of Love suddenly halts filming for about a month. Officially, the pause is to polish the script and wait out the rainy season. But the timing, 10 days after the cast announcement, raised every eyebrow in the industry. Meanwhile, SLL, the group's drama production arm and the studio machine behind years of JTBC hits, did not file for rehabilitation and insists its slate for the rest of the year is moving forward. Still, fans immediately ask the only question that matters to us. What happens to the dramas? 2 big titles, Gold Digger and The Sacred Jewel with Ahn Bo-hyun and Lee Sung-min, are announced for JTBC's second half of 2026, and The Sacred Jewel has already wrapped filming. But so far, neither has a confirmed broadcast date, and insiders admit that some projects still shooting are now on painfully tight timelines. On June 30th, the court made its call. The 4 sister companies went into receivership, while JTBC itself was handed 1 month to strike a survival deal with its creditors. One bankruptcy expert put it plainly, this goes beyond one company running short on cash. It is the start of a structural crisis for Korean content itself. For scale, the missed payment that started all this, 20.6 billion won, is about $13.5 million. Some American streaming shows spend more than that on a single episode. That is how thin the ground under this entire industry had become. A court can freeze assets, but it can't freeze consequences. When an industry this size starts to fall, somebody always ends up underneath it, and there are really only 2 candidates. The first candidate is the people who make the dramas. It works like a row of dominoes. Production companies get scared, so fewer dramas get made. Fewer dramas means sponsors offer smaller budgets. Smaller budgets mean fewer roles, and when actors finally land one, the offer is lower because there's simply less money in the pot. The top stars will be fine. They can lower their fees for prestige projects or live comfortably off endorsement deals. Everyone else takes the hit with no cushion. The supporting actors, the camera crews, the costume designers, the scriptwriters, the makeup artists, the same people who were already surviving on $74 an episode. Follow the chain far enough and it ends in the obvious place. The whole ecosystem that produces K-dramas starts to give way, one layer at a time. The fear inside these companies goes beyond money now. Every drama is a global product, which means every drama can be sunk by a global audience before it even airs. K-dramas used to be written for Korea, with maybe a side glance at the Philippines or Indonesia. In the West, they were a niche. Now the whole world is watching, and the whole world gets a vote. Topics and portrayals that are normalized in South Korea can read as insensitive abroad, and casting choices that would have passed without a whisper 10 years ago now get dissected within hours of the announcement. When MBC announced The Perfect Lie starring Yoo Yeon-seok, criticism and boycott calls spread across international fan communities almost immediately, as old controversies around the actor resurfaced. The drama hasn't even premiered, and it's already fighting for its life. A decade ago, a controversy like that stays inside Korea and blows over in a week. Today it's global and searchable forever, and every casting director in Seoul knows it. It cuts the other way too. Humor that kills in Korea can land with a thud abroad. Netflix's star-packed comedy Husbands in Action came out this June, and while plenty of viewers laughed, one major Korean outlet's review asked bluntly where the jokes were. Mixed is a terrifying word when your budget has that many zeros, so the companies are becoming brutally selective about what gets made at all. Which brings us to the second candidate for who pays the price: us, the viewers. Fewer risks means fewer of the strange, slow, deeply Korean stories that made us fall in love with dramas in the first place. And nobody is going to read about this in a history book someday because we're watching it happen in real time. So is this the end of K-dramas? Not quite. But what rises out of this mess will look very different from what came before. And one of the changes is something fans have been begging for 20 years. Every boom has a peak, and the K-drama industry has passed its own. The golden age of unlimited spending is over. What's left is an industry learning to be pickier and more careful with its money. Even Netflix is trapped by its own success. After Queen of Tears, When Life Gives You Tangerines and Squid Game, every new Korean project arrives with the expectation of a massive check attached. The likely future splits down two paths. Down one, the focus shifts to sustainable productions instead of massive bets on stories we've already seen 100 times. K-dramas become something else entirely, a tool of national strategy. Because the government wants to be the safety net, President Lee Jae-myung has promised heavy state backing for Korean culture, framing K-dramas as one of the country's most powerful soft power weapons, with a stated goal of growing Korea's content and culture industries to 300 trillion won a year in sales by 2030, over $200 billion. But government money can come with government preferences. Some industry voices quietly worry that, with the administration pushing for warmer ties with China, publicly funded dramas could feel pressure to portray certain topics and certain neighbors more gently. That's speculation, not policy. But when studios are this desperate for funding, even speculation starts to shape what gets written. JTBC, for the record, has always played its dramas fairly safe. A company fighting for survival, though, is not a company in a strong position to say no. There is a strange silver lining in all of this, though. Scarcity is forcing the industry to finally tell the stories it spent decades refusing to tell. For most of K-drama history, the formula was rigid: a powerful male lead and a female lead who orbits him. Think of Goblin or My Love from the Stars. Beloved shows where the heroine ultimately depends on a supernatural man to save her. Korean culture critics warned about this for years. Female viewers find comfort in those characters, they argued, but that very comfort could quietly work against the standing of the women watching. The writer behind Mine, Lady in Dignity, and Strong Woman Do Bong Soon knows exactly how deep that bias ran. Baek Mi-kyung revealed that when she pitched female-led stories to the big production companies, including JTBC, they would either decline outright or offer a smaller budget, purely because the lead was a woman. Her sharpest point was about age. Korean audiences are crazy about romantic comedies, she said, but only for the young, even though the people actually sitting in front of the TV are mostly older viewers. They don't love senior love. Every senior romance pitch got shut down with the same excuse. Viewers would switch the TV off. That wall is finally cracking, and strangely, we can thank the crisis for it. With the market oversaturated and viewers exhausted by recycled plots, producers finally started reaching for the stories this industry had never told. The streaming wars helped too. Netflix, hunting for anything that felt fresh, backed exactly the kind of leads Korean broadcasters kept rejecting. Look at The Glory, or The Price of Confession. Both are carried by female leads in their 30s and 40s, and a decade ago that was unimaginable. Today it's a trend, with heroines who do more than fall for a prince-like male lead. They drive the most exciting storylines themselves. Jung-hwa, one of the biggest celebrities in Korea, described the change from the inside. Once you hit 30, you couldn't land a leading role, and past 35, you were typecast as somebody's mother. Now we can see many strong female characters boldly embracing life on their own terms, she said, and I feel fortunate and happy to be able to tell women's stories, even at my age. And there's one more upside hiding in the wreckage. Fewer dramas might simply mean better dramas. For years, fans everywhere have complained about shows that start with a bang and collapse into nonsense by episode 10, because scripts were rushed into production to feed the boom. With fewer greenlights, writers get real development time. Studios stop sprinting scripts into production half-finished and start investing in the stories actually worth telling. The copy-paste romances thin out. And we stop drowning in a dozen forgettable releases every month, so the great ones actually get room to breathe. So ask yourself, are you over K-dramas, or is this painful reset exactly what they needed to become great again? Tell me in the comments. I read them all. And while you're here, check out how some Korean actors survived the grueling military enlistment, because that story is wilder than any drama.